All right, so ready to dive into something that I think might make some people uh, squirm a little bit.
Oh, is it something scary?
Well, not exactly scary, but, for some folks, it can be a bit daunting. We're talking humor.
Humor. Oh, okay. I was thinking like public speaking or something.
Well, that too, but specifically how to use humor to become a more engaging speaker,
Yeah.
even if you think you're, not naturally funny.
Right, because a lot of people think, oh, you're either born funny or you're not.
Exactly. But what we're diving into today is going to challenge that notion. The idea is that humor is a skill. You can learn it just like, you can learn to play the piano or code or whatever.
Really? So anyone can be funny. That's interesting. Where are we getting these ideas from today?
We've got a couple of great sources. First up, we're going to be unpacking some insights from David Nihill's book, How to Be Interesting to Talk to. Find your voice and make people listen.
Okay, how to be interesting. I like
Eh,
that.
Right. And what's really cool is that Nihill himself, he actually used to suffer from terrible stage fright.
Oh, well.
And then he went on to become a stand-up comedian. So he really knows his stuff.
That's quite a transformation.
It is. And we're also going to be pulling in some commentary from a humor expert, Lu Xin. So we've got a great mix of perspectives here.
Sounds like a good deep dive.
Right.
So what's the goal here? What are we trying to achieve?
The mission, if you will, is to give you some practical techniques that are inspired by stand-up comedy.
Stand-up comedy. That makes sense. Those
Yeah.
guys, they really know how to hold an audience's attention.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. If they can make a room full of strangers laugh, imagine the power you'll have in your next presentation or speech, right?
I'm starting to see the potential here. So where do we begin? How do we get funny?
Well, let's start with the basics. Crafting your humor. One of the first things that really jumped out at me in Nihill's book is this idea that, a well-told anecdote, a story, it's way more effective than just relying on one-liners.
Oh, that's interesting. Why is that?
Because a personal story, it allows you to connect with your audience on a human level, right?
Yeah.
To be relatable, vulnerable even. And that resonates with people way more than a canned joke ever could. There's this great example in the book. It's about a speaker giving a talk on emotional management.
Emotional management doesn't exactly scream hilarious, does it?
No, not really. But this speaker, he could have easily launched into, a dry academic lecture.
Yeah, I can see that happening. Lots of bullet points, maybe a graph or two.
Totally. But instead, he starts by telling this story about growing up with his identical twin brother.
Oh, twins. That could be fun.
Yeah, and the story is about how, even as a kid, he was like insanely aware of any hint of favoritism.
Oh, I see. So like if one twin got a slightly bigger piece of cake or something.
Exactly. Like if his brother's cookie was even a tiny bit bigger than his, it was like a major crisis.
Uh-huh. I get it. Sibling rivalry. It's universal.
Right. And it's a simple story, but it's relatable, it's funny, and it instantly makes the speaker seem more human.
We've all felt that pang of injustice at some point, haven't we? Whether it's about cookies or something else.
Totally. And through that shared experience, he's already got the audience on his side, even before he gets to the actual content of his talk.
That's clever. So it's not just about being funny. It's about using humor to connect with the audience.
Absolutely. So how do we mine our own lives for this kind of comedic gold? How do we find those funny stories?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where do we even begin?
Well, Nihill gives us this brilliant formula. He says, humor equals tragedy times time.
Tragedy times time. What does that even mean?
It's basically saying that a lot of humor comes from, looking back at past mishaps, things that went wrong, and finding the funny side.
Okay, that makes sense. So when something embarrassing happens, it's not funny in the moment, but later on.
Exactly. Give it some time, let that initial sting fade, and you might find yourself laughing about it.
It's like that classic saying, comedy is tragedy plus time.
Right. It's all about perspective. It's like, that time I tripped and fell flat on my face in front of my entire high school.
Oh no, can't say I've had that experience.
At the time, I wanted to, disappear. But now, it's a hilarious story I could share with a laugh.
I guess time really does heal all wounds, or at least makes them funny.
It's like alchemy, turning pain into laughter.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
So, okay, we've got our story. We've let time work its magic. Now, how do we actually shape it into something, something funny? Something that will get a laugh?
Yeah, how do we make it a joke? Is there like a formula for that too?
Well, Nihill breaks down joke structure with another handy formula. He says, punchline equals setup plus twist.
Setup plus twist. Okay, I'm intrigued.
He uses this classic Chinese comic sketch called Just Kidding to illustrate this. Have you ever heard of it?
Just kidding.
Uh-huh.
No, rings a bell, but I don't think I know it.
Oh, it's great. So it's a pretty simple premise. A mother asks her son to, watch their clothes drying outside while she prepares dinner.
Okay, sounds pretty normal so far.
Right. So then this thief comes along, and through this, like, clever ruse, he tricks the boy into repeatedly saying the phrase, just kidding, as he steals the clothes.
Wait, just kidding. Like every time the thief takes something, the boy just says, just kidding.
Yep. And the comedian builds all this suspense, as the boy innocently utters, just kidding, each time a garment disappears.
Oh, I see where this is going. So the audience is expecting the kid to, like, finally realize what's happening, right?
Exactly. And then, bam, the punchline hits.
Yeah.
The son tells his mother that, just kidding, took the clothes.
Oh, that's great. That's really clever.
Right. The audience is led down one path, expecting the boy to be upset, and then, boom, the unexpected twist hits them.
And it's that surprise, that sudden shift in perspective that makes it funny.
Exactly. And this actually ties into something else Nihill emphasizes about writing jokes and speeches. He says, write them as performable dialogue, not just narratives.
Write them as dialogue. What's the difference?
Well, when you write as dialogue, you're forced to think about, like, pacing, rhythm, how the words will actually sound when spoken. You're essentially anticipating the audience's reaction with every line.
So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it.
Exactly. He even uses his own background as an example. Being Irish, he plays on audience expectations about his accent in his stand-up routines. It adds this whole other layer of humor.
So it's about being self-aware and using your unique traits to your advantage. I like that.
So we've covered stories, structure, and the importance of writing for performance. But how do we actually conquer the stage and deliver all this comedic brilliance? That's where things can get, scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Stage fright is a real thing.
It is, and we'll dig into that next time.
Looking forward to it.
I think we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Standing backstage, heart pounding, palms sweating, that feeling like you might forget your own name, let alone your, carefully crafted jokes.
Oh yeah, stage fright, it's a universal experience. I think even the most seasoned performers, they still get a little nervous before going on stage.
I would hope so. It'd be kind of weird if they didn't.
Yeah, a little bit. But, as Nihill points out in his book, the key is to kind of reframe those nerves. Think of it as excitement, as energy you can channel into your performance.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
But easier said than done, right?
Oh, absolutely. But there are definitely techniques that can help. Nihill talks a lot about the importance of rehearsal, and it's not just about memorizing your material word for word. It's about getting comfortable with the flow, the rhythm, the pauses, even how your voice rises and falls.
It's like anything else. The more you practice, the more confident you become.
Exactly. He suggests this really, really interesting technique called the memory palace. Have you ever heard of that?
Memory palace. Yeah, it rings a bell, but I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay, so it's this ancient memorization technique where you basically mentally associate key points of your speech with locations in an imagined building.
Okay, so, let's say my opening joke is about a lost cat. I would imagine that cat perched on the welcome mat of my memory palace.
Exactly. Or your main argument, maybe that's represented by, like, a stack of books in the library of your palace, right?
So as you mentally walk through this palace, you're essentially jogging your memory and triggering those key points.
Precisely. It might sound a little out there, but it's a surprisingly effective way to combat those dreaded memory blanks that can happen when you're, nervous on stage.
That's really cool. I'm gonna try that. But what about the physical symptoms of stage fright? The shaky hands, the racing heart. Any advice on dealing with those?
Yeah, Nihill offers some practical tips, like deep breathing exercises before you go on stage, wearing dark clothing to, minimize sweat stains, things like that.
I love that. It's about acknowledging those physical reactions.
Right.
And finding ways to manage them.
Right. And remember, even if you feel like you're, falling apart on the inside, the audience probably can't even tell.
That is reassuring, actually.
But ultimately, the best way to conquer stage fright is to, just face your fear head on. Nihill really advocates for what he calls bar testing your material.
Bar testing. What is that?
It's about finding, like, low-stakes opportunities to practice your material in front of a live audience. It could be an open mic night, a community event, even just gathering some friends and family.
So it's about getting comfortable with the feeling of being in the spotlight and, getting feedback on what works and what doesn't.
Exactly. And every time you do it, you gain a little more confidence. You realize it's not as scary as you thought.
Okay, so we've prepped, we've rehearsed, we've even done some of this bar testing.
Yeah.
We're finally on stage. The spotlight is on us. What's next?
Well, this brings us to another one of Nihill's key insights. Acknowledge the moment. It's a concept that comes straight from the world of stand-up comedy, where, comedians are constantly reading the room, responding to unexpected events, interacting with the audience. It's all very dynamic.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of being present and in the moment rather than just reciting a script.
Exactly. It's about noticing if, someone coughs really loudly or the microphone cuts out and making a joke about it. Stand-up comics call it reading the room, and it shows you're engaged and in on the joke with the audience.
I can see how that would make you seem more relatable and authentic.
Absolutely. And it also ties into this idea of controlling the audience, which might sound a bit manipulative, but it's really just about understanding how audiences behave in a live setting.
So it's more about guiding their attention and keeping them engaged.
Right, exactly. Nihill uses this example of audience participation in Chinese stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
It's very common there for audiences to shout out responses, make suggestions, even heckle the comedian.
Wow, really? That's so different from what we're used to.
It is. But skilled comedians in China, they actually embrace this dynamic. They use it to their advantage. They create this sense of shared energy, this unified field of attention where everyone feels involved.
That's fascinating. So how do we create that kind of field of attention in a less boisterous setting?
Well, Nihill suggests a really simple but effective technique.
Yeah.
Ask the audience to clap if they can hear you.
Oh, I've seen speakers do that.
It's a small thing, but it instantly focuses everyone's attention and creates a sense of unity.
We're all in this together.
Precisely. And speaking of togetherness, another important aspect of controlling the audience is, hooking them from the start. You have about 30 seconds to capture their attention and make them want to hear more.
So strong opening is crucial.
No pressure, right? It's all about confidence and connecting with your audience from the moment you step on stage. So you've captivated the audience, delivered your material, you've created that shared experience, but there's one crucial step left.
This is the part I always struggle with, looking back at my performances, actually critiquing them. It's kind of like listening to a recording of your own voice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Always a bit cringy.
Yeah, I think most people feel that way. It's hard to be objective about your own performance.
It is. But as Nihill says, and I love this, always be refining. And that's where the real growth happens, right? Taking that critical look at yourself and finding ways to improve.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing process. You're never really done refining.
Just how do we make this whole review process a little less painful?
Yeah.
And a lot more productive.
Well, I think it's all about shifting your perspective. Instead of focusing on your, perceived flaws or mistakes, try to approach it with a sense of curiosity and detachment almost.
Detachment. Okay, so how do we do that?
Imagine you're a coach watching an athlete's performance, right? You're not emotionally invested in the outcome. You're just observing, analyzing, looking for ways to improve.
So it's like taking the emotion out of it and viewing it as a learning experience.
Exactly. And, professional comedians, they actually use a rating system to evaluate their jokes.
Really? A rating system? How does that work?
They might assign points based on how well a joke landed, how big the laugh was, or if it elicited groans instead of chuckles.
So it's like applying a data analysis to humor.
In a way, yeah. It might seem a bit clinical, but it can be incredibly effective. By tracking your performance over time, you can identify patterns, see what consistently works, pinpoint the areas that need, a little bit more work.
That's really interesting. It takes the guesswork out of refining your material,
Cool.
Right?
It does. It gives you concrete data to work with.
Going through all this material, it strikes me that humor is more than just telling jokes or getting laughs. It's there's something deeper going on.
Yeah, I agree. Jean actually talks about this in his notes. He says that true humor, it's a reflection of how you see the world. It's about noticing the absurdity in everyday situations, the little ironies that, make us human.
Right, and it makes me think back to that humor equals tragedy times time formula. Once we have some distance from a difficult experience, we can start to see the humor in it.
Absolutely. It takes a certain perspective, a willingness to laugh at ourselves and the crazy situations life throws at us.
And that's what makes, I think, truly funny people so magnetic.
Yeah.
It's not just that they tell great jokes,
Yeah.
it's that they have this unique way of looking at the world that's both insightful and entertaining.
I think that's a great way to put it. They can find the humor in the unexpected, the light in the darkness.
Okay, so let's sum up all this wisdom for our listeners, because we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We talked about the power of personal stories, mastering joke structure, rehearsal techniques, reading the room, controlling the audience, and the importance of refining your material. And it might seem overwhelming, but remember, all of these techniques, they're based on the experiences of a real person, David Nihill, who went from being terrified of public speaking to making a career out of stand-up comedy.
Yeah, that's a pretty inspiring story. If he can do it, anyone can. It's about taking those first steps, trying new things, and, not being afraid to bomb a few times along the way.
Exactly. Failure is part of the process. So here's a quick recap of the 7 principles we've uncovered today. First, use personal stories to connect with your audience. Second, understand the structure of a joke and the importance of a well-placed twist. Third, embrace rehearsal as your secret weapon against stage fright and those memory lapses. Fourth, learn to read the room and adapt to the unexpected. Fifth, guide the audience's attention and create a shared experience. Sixth, constantly refine your material based on feedback and self-analysis. And finally, remember that humor is more than just telling jokes. It's a worldview, a way of finding the light in the darkness and sharing that light with others.
It's a powerful tool, and it's available to everyone.
So, dear listener, we have a challenge for you. Think about a funny story from your own life. Maybe it's something that happened recently, or maybe it's something you've been laughing about for years. Now, see if you can apply the techniques we've discussed today to make that story even funnier.
Share it with a friend, test it out at your next family gathering, or be really bold and try it out at an open mic night.
You might be surprised at the power of humor to connect with people, to lighten the mood, and to make a lasting impression.
And as you go out there and experiment with your newfound humor skills, keep this in mind. If humor truly does come from tragedy over time, what seemingly tragic event in your life might become comedic gold in the future? What story will you be telling 5, 10, 20 years from now that will have people laughing? Keep that question in mind, keep exploring the world with a playful curiosity, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.